Hollywood 1969 is full of life, murder, and a man named Rick Dalton who is on the brink of a career and personal life crisis. The film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's story is satirically told of the Tate murders mixed with metafiction. This is a story on how the characters in 1969 correlate with each other's lives in subtle ways. This film uses a technique of narrative mirroring to help tell a visual story. This mirroring is told in scenes, colors, lines, small details, and relationships. First, some important relationships we see are Rick and Cliff's. Then, Rick's relationship with himself, Cliff's relationship with himself and his past, and Cliff's relationship with his dog Brandy. We also see how Sharon Tate interacts with the world around her. We see several instances throughout the film when the conflict rises and decreases. According to Block, the usage of deep or flat space or saturation of color depicts the intensity of conflict within a scene specific to the movie. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood plays with shadows and how they are used to predict violence or conflict. Caleb Decatu is a shadowy character using a long cowboy hat and a Zapata mustache to hide in the dark, and we see examples of this towards Caleb's villainous climax with Marabella Lancer. Also, at the end of the film, when the hippies are walking up Cielo Drive to break in Rick's house, which is also covered in shadow. The film depicts bright colors with usually happy and joyful scenes like colorfully saturated shots of downtown Los Angeles and the saturation of lights around Sharon Tate dancing at the Playboy Mansion. The purpose of doing this would be to control the amount of conflict that are within scenes. If we made a graph, it would show constant rising and falling of conflict depending on the level of saturation and space or other types of visual structural elements. Bruce Block says that the greater the contrast in a visual component, the more the visual intensity of the picture increases, and the greater the affinity in a visual component, the more the visual intensity of a picture decreases. The usage of contrast and affinity narratively is to mirror or find similarity to the beginning and the ending of this film, and all the smaller mirroring elements within it, i.e. the flamethrower and the dog food scene. This visual tonal separation is apparent, so we can find relations and cues to determine how the story has not just color, but narrative contrast and affinity. We see metafictitious examples that mirror real-life people, situations, and scenarios. Examples are Hollywood 1969 as its own entity. Characters like James Stacy, Steve McQueen, Mama Cass, Connie Stevens, Michelle Phillips, etc. Also, TV shows did exist already, like Lancer, FBI, and a meta-remaking of Wanted Dead or Alive, renamed Bounty Law. The conflicts within this film aren't necessarily the typical obvious external fights we've seen in previous Tarantino movies. Most of the conflict in this film is way more internal. Tarantino's heavy use of mirroring elements can be seen in many instances. Not only does this film mirror the 1960s itself through its elements of metafiction, but it uses songs and real tales of Hollywood to intertwine itself, i.e. Lancer, FBI, Steve McQueen, and the Manson murders, to name a few. At the beginning, we mirror the characters' actions with other characters and their current situations. The film's soundtrack plays throughout the radio the entire movie mostly, and interlaces with our other characters, reminding us that even though some characters may not share the same screen, they are somehow connected. An example of this is when the song Treat Her Right by Roy Head and the Traits plays on Rick's radio in the Cadillac, but also we cut to Sharon dancing on the Pan Am to the same rhythm, back to Rick and Cliff opening the door to the restaurant, back to Sharon and Roman driving home, and finally cutting back to Rick and Cliff briskly walking through the restaurant. Without these mirrors, certain elements wouldn't have as much impact throughout the story and its several climaxes. This narrative mirroring is also visually apparent when the screen splits into two as Kurt Russell narrates, giving the audience an exposition to begin the final act. Cliff's relationship with Brandy is mirroring throughout the film and is also being built to tell us how strong their bond is when Cliff gives a signal to attack. This mirroring shows us how building on Cliff and Brandy's relationship is meaningful. Without this mirror, the depth of their bond would have significantly less meaning. We see an instance of this when Cliff drops the raccoon-flavored Wolf's Tooth brand dog food straight into the dog bowl in his trailer home in Van Nuys, and again before they get into the fight at the end. Sharon Tate's presence helps tremendously to push the story forward. Her coloring in many scenes is that of light and brightness and high contrast. She really seems to like bright yellow. For example, when she enters the Playboy Mansion, her outfit sticks out because we want the focus to be on her. Another example is when she is wearing a black turtleneck and her hair is golden, flowing in the wind. When Sharon is looking at the movie theater on the street, the backlight hits her in such a way it gives her an angelic aura. Or when she is packing her clothes, we see her in this joyful state, enmeshed by a multitude of colors on clothes she is wearing, wallpaper patterns, and the different movie posters and areas of her home. Sharon Tate mirrors herself mythically in this film. She does so also satirically. Anybody who knows about the real-life murders knows the inevitable end Tarantino is alluding to. The story spends a lot of time in mysterious tension. The story set in the 60s mirrors itself, in again, a metafiction-y way, because we see these real-life instances being played on, like with Rick lying to James Stacy, not auditioning for the part in The Great Escape, with Rick dubbed in for McQueen, or when McQueen is cross-analyzing or judging the Polanski-Tate-Sebring love triangle. The last song of the film, Lily Langtry theme, plays when we see Rick finally walk up to Sharon's home and Rick's conflict has been resolved with himself, because not only does he get external validation of his self-worth through Sharon's recognition of him, but he redeems the inner hero he thought he lost by fighting for his home and averting the satirical inevitability we thought was bound to happen. The lights shine around Rick amidst the surrounding shadows like a spotlight as he makes his last exit to the Tate residence or the Hollywood gate into a solidified heaven. Not as things were, but as they should have been.